cameras. Yes. And feel free to choose a pseudonym if you don't want your real name to be highlighted. That's totally fine. But yeah, the recording's begun, so feel free to make those adjustments. Now, as we move on, I will be passing it over to Pam, who's going to present our report. We have a really exciting report.
Thanks, Nikki. Hi, everyone. My name is Pamela. I'm with the Worker Solidarity Network, and I've been with the WSN for over 5 years now. I'm glad to be in this space with you all today. It's been almost a year since we've launched WSN's first report, Can't Stand the Heat, Get Out of the Kitchen, where we spoke with fast food workers, restaurant workers, overall food and beverage industry workers on how extreme heat impacts them at work. The reason why we decided to look at this intersection between climate and labor justice is that food service work is precarious. And this includes lack of job security, low unionization rates, low pay, exclusion from health benefits, part-time hours, normalized mistreatment, and so much more. And we learned that extreme weather events exacerbate worker precarity as well. And while we were doing the research, we found out that WorkSafe BC had a large increase of workers, also workers in the restaurant industry or food industry, that put in complaints due to extreme heat during the 2021 heat dome, which meant that this is something we need to look into. And some of the outcomes here is that in the report is that we will acknowledge that it does impact working conditions. Extreme heat does impact working conditions. It does impact employment conditions as well. Some things that we saw namely in employment conditions, is despite labor protections during extreme weather events, food service workers experience lack of breaks for hydration, changes to their position when they were hired, income insecurity, and lack of access to their rights. And then in the working condition theme, workers experience, the majority of them reported that their workplace does not implement adequate protective measures or health and safety measures during extreme weather events. And most workers face amplified physical and mental health concerns when extreme weather events take place, and that there was lack of dress code flexibility when it is too hot outside. After this research project, we continued to work with the 35 food service workers or food and beverage workers, and more folks joined the project, the Climate Labor Project. And refusing unsafe work was a theme that came up quite a bit, and how, refusing unsafe work may not be an easy task for many, especially in precarious low wage work. So essentially kind of what we found out was the issues is that outweigh how easy it is to refuse unsafe work. So for example, folks wouldn't want to refuse unsafe work because they have precarious status and they can't afford to lose out on the money. They need to pay their rent. They don't want to get fired. They don't want to risk their reputation in the industry. Oftentimes when they do ask about refusing unsafe work or informing their employers about issues at the workplace, responses like "don't call WorkSafe," telling workers not to worry about it, "we can't afford for you to stay home." And those are kind of some of the outcomes in the conversations around refusing unsafe work that took place. But amongst all of this, though, despite all of this, the working conditions, the employment conditions, the solidarity was palpable amongst workers, and they looked out for one another during extreme heat. This looks like hydration check-ins, swapping shifts, and ensuring a buddy system. But we know that this responsibility shouldn't be put on workers' shoulders alone, and workers need better protections in place to ensure their health and safety.
Yeah, it's a meeting I'm listening to.
Yeah, so that's a bit about that. But we'll be hearing more about other perspectives, important perspectives on the intersections between extreme heat and vulnerable communities for migrant justice, disability justice. And this is important as we build resilience in the face of climate crisis to help deepen our understanding of heat impacts on vulnerable communities. So I'll pass it back to Nikki to introduce our lovely panelist.
Thank you, Pam. Yes, I dropped the link for the report in the chat for those who are curious to take a further look. But of course, we are here to hear from our lovely panelists. So I'll start by introducing everyone in order of which the questions will be answered, starting with Senan. Senan Bagan is a longtime activist in the Filipino community and in the migrant justice, labor, and women's movements. In her advocacy work, she has participated in the discussions and assisted in research activities to produce government briefs for the advancement of the rights and equality of migrant and marginalized workers, women and girls. She's a steering committee member of the Vancouver Committee for Domestic Workers and Caregivers' Rights, CWCR, since its formation in 1992, and an active member of the BC Employment Standards Coalition, BCESC, and the Migrant Rights Network Canada. Please joining me in giving a warm round of applause to Senan. Next, we have Rowan Burge. Rowan Burge, she, they, is the provincial director of the BC Poverty Reduction Coalition. They're a disabled, queer, white settler living on the unceded, stolen lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. Rowan is a chronically ill advocate organizer who works towards poverty eradication with and for marginalized communities across BC. Rowan is a renter in East Van with her cat, Nico. Outside of work, Rowan is learning to roller skate, plays on a queer dodgeball team, and advocates for fair pharmacare and disability justice as a patient advocate. Join me also in welcoming Rowan. Next, we have Byron. Byron Cruz arrived in Canada in 1992, fleeing persecution for resisting inequality and state violence in Guatemala. While working as an organizing and outreach coordinator for the BC Federation of Labor's Occupation Health and Safety Center's Migrant Worker Program in Vancouver, he is also an active member of the Sanctuary Health Collective and Migrant Rights Network, a grassroots collective advocating universal access to healthcare, education, and social services. Wonderful. Thank you, Byron. Round of applause. And last but not least is Sartaj Bering. Sartaj Bering, she, her, is a national representative and organizer with UFCW Canada and sits on the board of directors of WSN. Based out of Vancouver, BC, Sartaj comes out of a retail grocery store and has used that experience to organize different retail units such as Sephora, Cineplex, and MEC. She's a passionate climate reform advocate and supports precarious workers that are dealing with climate-related workplace issues. Her campaigns have led her to work closely with young workers and joins them in their demand for a better protection at work. Wonderful. Thank you all. I'm so excited to hear from you for the next about 45 minutes. So we can start with the question. The order will start with Senan, then we'll move to Rowan, then Byron, and Sartaj for every question. So welcome, Senan. Our first question is, when was the first time you experienced the impact of extreme heat in your community? What communities do we need to listen to when we are advocating for access to cooling?
Hi, yes, my name is Senan, and well, my family arrived in Vancouver on March 7, 1978, and for the first time, my husband, Pedro, and I experienced the difficulty in managing the extreme heat in Vancouver towards the end of June 2021, as we all know, when the temperature peaked at 34 degrees centigrade. I was in my late 60s, and Pedro was in his early 70s. So I was very concerned with how it would impact Pedro's health because of his medical condition, though he is taking maintenance bills. We live in an old apartment building that cannot have an air conditioning unit installed, and had to stay in a cheap hotel in downtown for 2 nights. So to care for older adults, pregnant women, and young children, especially those with medical conditions, those living in poverty, and those working in the fields and other outdoor jobs like construction workers, are crucial to consider, as they are the most negatively impacted by extreme heat, if not kept in a comfortable temperature. And BC at that time reported about over 600 people almost dying due to extreme heat from June 25 to 30, 2021. So I think it's very important that we looked into these groups of people who are very vulnerable, especially in the time of extreme heat. Thanks.
Thank you, Senan. What a great answer. Moving on to Rowan.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Senan, for sharing that. And I have a similar experience. I have type 1 diabetes, so I take insulin. And I had a similar experience of the heat really impacting both my insulin's effectiveness, and also people who take insulin often have more extreme sensation of heat in the body. So I experience heat injury. And like Senan, I'm in a rental apartment that does not have air conditioning. And unfortunately, I don't even have a cross breeze. Like I have a one window situation. So it got very, very hot. And it was really scary, actually. Like I'm a younger person, and I still, was really frightened, and yeah, I just couldn't regulate my temperature, and it was pretty scary. I got brain fog, I got confused, I got overheated, my sugars got out of control. It was a pretty scary time. And so I think that, yeah, people who experience disabilities, chronic illnesses, we really need to be focused on centering folks like that during these kinds of extreme events, especially because much of our climate policies right now don't center and include people with disabilities. But I also want to highlight tenants, people who live in rental situations where they might not have the appropriate supports to access putting air conditioning or cooling measures into their units in the same way that owners might. We also heard, of course, from the heat dome report that folks with schizophrenia, for example, were much more likely to die. And then, groups like people who use drugs, and then, of course, people who live outdoors are like first frontline response to any kind of extreme weather situation. So I think that we need to also consider these groups when we're thinking about who we need to be listening to when we're advocating for cooling in our communities. And elderly folks, like there's a lot of groups that really weren't thought of and included proactively in the climate policy that we currently have in place. So I think that it's a really important thing to have this conversation to make sure that, yeah, communities that are targeted by these policies are considered and appropriately centered to create mitigation strategies that work in an intersectional way for everybody. Thanks.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Wow, what a wonderful response, Rowan. I too also experienced the renters, yeah, like no windows. Yeah. The strife of that summer for sure. Our next, let's hear from Byron.
Thank you for these questions, and thank you, everyone. Thanks for this great panel that got invited. And in terms of our community of agricultural migrant workers, the situation with the heat has been for many years, especially in those greenhouses where when the normal temperature is like 34, for example, in the greenhouse, it gets to almost 40. Then it is very often that we hear the workers being affected and feeling sick. And recently, we will say in the last 4 years, that we have been also getting a lot of situations in the Okanagan. Last year, we had a terrible situation with fires. It was defined as the worst fires in many years. I think in West Kelowna was the most affected area. And we had a tour a couple years ago to the different farms in the Okanagan, when we found that almost 97% of the farms did not come with any air condition. Then the workers were not able to sleep, and they were very tired the next morning. And that cannot continue on that way. And I don't think there is any regulations right now, and we need to pressure about that. And sorry, I didn't put my camera at the beginning. I have to do it now. And also, as mentioned by Senen, migrant workers in the construction sector were also affected last year, and we haven't been able to support them. And we are now planning with the Working Solidarity Network to start organizing in that community very soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Byron. Yes, absolutely. Rural migrant workers face the brunt of this as well, and we're definitely excited to start organizing in that region as well. Thank you. We can move to Sartaj.
Yeah, definitely. Similar to what my peers have mentioned already, 2021 was quite the year for extreme weather-related events in recent memory, of course. The heat dome that occurred at that time is probably the one that comes to my mind the most as well. It was something that was unavoidable for a lot of people. I mean, summers are warm, they get warm the past few years as well, but that was the time that we really noticed that especially the most vulnerable populations were really at risk for heat-related illnesses, for example. And like I think Senan mentioned, there were a lot of people that were having to be hospitalized. I remember people that were trying to reach emergency services, but they were put on hold because of the large influx of people trying to reach out. So, you know, one of the populations or communities that I think we also need to listen to is the healthcare community. They're the ones that see, you know, the brunt of this, you know, in terms of our already struggling healthcare system. So I think that when we're really, you know, centering voices, it's important to center those that are, you know, dealing with these issues firsthand and are seeing the impacts directly. There's also, of course, like Byron mentions, the workers that are working outside that are struggling because of this and have been for, you know, many years, whether it be, construction, migrant workers, or those that work indoors in restaurants or kitchens. It can get extremely warm in general, but when you have these extreme heat related events, it's impossible to you know, be able to escape that. It was hard enough trying to cook in my own home with my mini oven, you know, with the lack of air conditioning and you know, any cooling devices. I can't imagine what it's like to be in a restaurant, you know, cooking meal after meal after meal. So these are the kind of voices and communities that we really need to be centering when we're having these conversations.
Yeah, absolutely, Sartaj, what a great point. At a point where customers that don't want to be cooking at home turn to restaurants and grocery stores and fast food to eat. And of course, those workers have very, very little protection, as this panel has been pointing out. So thank you all for wonderful answers to the first question. Now we can move on to question number 2, which is, as you can see on the screen, extreme heat has impacts beyond the workplace. Can you speak to the ways that heat affects not only individuals, but their families and communities? And we can start with Senan again. So thank you.
Well, so extreme heat causes heat stroke and other health problems like respiratory diseases and sometimes death. It affects our health and, of course, our health system. It affects the environment, like wildfires, as have been mentioned several times, which may result to loss of homes and properties. So there is really a lot of impacts that extreme heat to not only to individuals and families, but really to our health system and environment. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, Rowan?
Yeah, I agree. I think, yeah, heat definitely impacts people's abilities to regulate their temperatures. You know, heat causes heat injuries. There were more than 619 deaths recorded because of the heat dome. But that, of course, looked at the days that the heat dome was happening. But I'm sure there were more deaths after that time because of the sort of longer term impacts of heat on the body. But I also think it's important to think about how the heat dome and other sort of extreme weather events impact the wider community in terms of intersections, like things like access to safe and adequate housing, your ability to cool yourself in your home. I think this event also had a big impact on people experiencing loneliness and feeling isolated and detached from networks, which I think was also a result of, you know, the COVID-19 pandemic happening right kind of before this happened. You know, people were told to go to the cooling centers, but the cooling centers, we'd also been told to stay home. So I think a lot of caused like confusion, upset, and I think overall like a deep sense of distrust in authorities to treat people with dignity and respect, and to sort of like have us. Like I think especially the disabled community after the COVID situation, and then experiencing the heat dome and wildfires, and just like feeling really left behind by a lot of things. And then I think, yeah, I just also kind of want to highlight that most of the folks who died during the heat dome were impacted by poverty. That was kind of the highest co-factor or whatever in people's deaths. I hate to like talk about it like that, but poverty really impacted most of the folks who died. And I think that this issue has huge impacts on things like housing, food security, health. The floods wiped out our food system. The heat dome, caused, chaos in our medical system. So I think that poverty and poverty eradication and thinking about this as like a human rights and dignity issue is really important. In terms of, how heat impacted all of us and how everybody who calls BC home was like, I think, deeply disrupted by this event that was unprecedented for us all.
That's great.
Absolutely. Yes. Poverty eradication is absolutely a key pillar in ensuring the protection of everyone. Next is Byron. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. And this morning I had a meeting with the Ministry of Labor in Guatemala, and I was exactly talking about this situation. As you know, more than 60% of the workforce in British Columbia in the area of agriculture comes from migrant workers. And that means more than 10,000 workers coming every year to the province on seasonal basis. And as a result of the heat waves and fires, last year, all the industry is affected. And only 30% of the migrant workers that usually come to the Conaran area will come back this year. Then the effect on their families and communities is huge. Last year, we had this situation with just one example. This is just one example, a farm with 89 workers from Guatemala who came with a 2 years working program, working permit. They were sent back to Guatemala after a few weeks. And during the weeks that they were here, they were not paid because they couldn't work. Then there is no emergency support for them in terms of income. And when the different agencies such as Watari supported them, and also other local organizations supported them, we could see the situation, how they were hungry actually. And they went back to Guatemala with no income and with no possibility of coming back. Then the economical impact is huge. Then we were talking this morning to the Guatemalan government about relocating them in other farms, in other provinces, and we will see what happens. But the fact that many of the farm workers are located in remote areas, then there is no attention on what is going on. And when there are emergencies, it's very hard to support them because there is no, they don't exist for the emergency service. They don't exist in terms of the translation of documents or the orders that comes from the emergency teams. Then something to take into account. Thank you.
Yes, wonderful points. Thank you, Byron. Sartaj?
Yeah, definitely. So we've kind of talked about, in terms of the impacts it has for workers, of course, like Byron's been mentioning, that the migrant workers at the heart of this as well. I think that there's other communities as well that are really struggling. For example, our schools, which I remember going to school when I was younger, and it was already hard enough, when you're getting close to summertime and you don't really have any sort of proper air conditioning or cooling services there. So, you have all the windows open, but it's still pretty warm in there. But that's only exacerbated over the past few years. And I think children, especially, needing that extra assistance as well, they are one of the populations that are really vulnerable for this. So, ensuring that our school communities are, and, whether it be the PAC or parent advisory committees, having that support as well to ensure that they're advocating for those students as best as possible as well. And like Rowan mentioned, these communities are all interconnected, and the effects can kind of ripple throughout. We're also seeing, those that are most vulnerable in terms of, for example, requiring any sort of support at home, whether it be needing home support services or anything like that. Those people were also very affected and continue to be affected with extreme heat conditions, as well as the workers that actually have to visit home from home to really support those. And, a lot of these homes, unfortunately, especially older buildings, don't really have the adequate style of cooling or air conditioning that's kind of needed in this day and age. And like mentioned before, the health impacts are, pretty stark. And that's something that I think we're going to continue to see going on into the future as well. And it's really important that we find some really good solutions and ensure that we're amplifying the right voices as well to government to ensure that these stories are being heard, because we're hearing throughout all of this that the effects are massive, and it's going to continue on, not just with extreme heat, but with other extreme weather related events as well.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Sartaj. Our third question is, in the report, we heard that many workers knew what they needed to be safe during extreme heat. And despite the worsened employment and working conditions during extreme weather, solidarity was palpable amongst workers. What does solidarity or community-driven response look like in your communities? Starting with Senan again. Thank you.
So in our community where who I work with CWCR, in-home care workers are usually alone and isolated. So working at their employers' homes with kids or someone they're taking care of. So they're really not a lot of what you call solidarity among themselves, because they are not the workers are not together, and so care worker organizations like CDWCR and other community service organizations can actually collaborate and share resources. So workers will have access to cooling kits and other resources that's needed just to make them comfortable, especially if their employers are not looking after their health and safety. So being in the home and not and workers being invisible. But of course, in other communities, as we've seen, communities are helping other communities, especially during when we had these big fires in BC. Other communities are actually helping out, putting out those fires, and even sacrificing their own lives to save other people's communities themselves. So yeah, I think it's very really heartening that people need to do all these things, and the government seems not to be doing a lot for their safety. So thanks.
Yeah, what a great response. And I think a lot of workers work in isolation, especially care workers. It's solitary work. And so solidarity is really difficult. It's great that organizations like CDWCR can try and fill that very large gap that, of course, as you mentioned, is completely neglected by the government. And in a lot of ways, a lot of labor organizations as well. So thank you, Senan. Rowan?
Yeah, thanks. Well, I think it's interesting in the coroner's report. One thing that struck me was that folks in the downtown east side did not die at a very high death rate. And I think that's partly because there is so much existing care networks and organizing between folks that are living in that neighborhood. I heard about people in shelters like filling up gloves with water and freezing it, or like just being really resourceful and crafty and like sharing resources, sharing knowledge across, from a unilateral mutual support level. I think that happened a lot in terms of like the neighborhood level as well, of like people just checking on their neighbors, like checking on the people living in their buildings. I don't think we can underestimate the importance of that. And I'm sure how many lives were saved because of neighbors checking on each other, making a cold bath, like helping share information, spread information about how to stay safe, how to keep your body cool. And then I think that, organizing tenants has been a really important piece of this, like making sure that folks in your building and organizing folks, the tenants unions are doing a really good job about helping educate people about their rights in terms of housing and things like that. And I think that's the case for unions and workers as well, like getting organized, connecting with each other and building solidarity out to take care of each other when your boss or your manager or your housing operator or whoever it is might not have the sort of systemic structural care in place to take care of folks. And so I think that there's like a variety of ways that people take care of each other, but I ultimately agree that, we shouldn't have to rely on our neighbors to take care of us. Like there should be sound structural policies in place to protect people in this kind of situation. And yeah, I also think the access without fear piece is really important. Like we heard from a lot of folks that were nervous about accessing cooling centers because they were like afraid of being deported for their migration status. And so I think developing like radically inclusive policies around like disability and also migrant rights from like a really intersectional solidarity based perspective is really important. And then I also think that like cross disability solidarity is something to work on for us in BC as well. Like I feel like disability gets sort of like separated into many different kinds of groups. And I'm sure this happens in like workers as well, of like different kinds of workers are sort of in silos. And I think that bridging those gaps to build movement and organizing folks to confront the wider structural problems is really important right now. Thanks.
Be outside without worrying about anything else.
What an excellent response. If I could just ask folks to mute themselves. Thanks, Rowan. Yeah, what a great response. I think, yeah, many things to say, but for the interest of time, I'll pass it along to Byron.
Yeah, thank you, Rowan, for mentioning about the access without fear. Definitely is an important aspect to take into account when we organize solidarity response. And now we are thinking about organizing the response within the workers in the constructions. That's something that we need to take into account necessarily. And in the last few years, we have been developing collective response with different organizations and groups. And we have trained also more than 100 agricultural migrant workers leaders as an emergency responders. And we don't have that budget anymore, but that was a very effective way to organize a collective response because they were able to call us and let us know when they needed help. And the need for having a communication device is it's important. Then having a few cell phones in the farms will help us to respond better, and especially because people don't have local phone lines. Then we need to take into account a way to communicate via WhatsApp right now, and also with the support of CALSA Aid in the past, we were able to respond to the phone calls to many farm workers who call us, and then they told us about not having access to drinkable water on the farms during the heat waves. Then there was an emergency response. We were able to do a tour to the different farms that called us in a matter of 2 or 3 days. We visited many farms with CALSA Aid. And last week we had a meeting within the Migrant Worker Center, CALSA Aid, and BC Fed, and we were talking about doing the same response this year. The migrant workers usually organize themselves. They let us know what they need. In many occasions, they are the ones who decide, okay, we need cooling containers, and they organize themselves in committees to see who is going to put the ice in the morning to the cool container. They put this cooling container in their tractor, and they are going to the whole farm checking how people are. And this is something that we are going to start doing again very soon, and also contacting the different consulates to let us know when they know about emergencies. Thank you.
It's wonderful. How great to follow the leadership of the workers who've organized themselves and let you know what they need. And that's always really great to see. Sartaj?
Yeah, definitely. Similar to what Rowan said, I think there's definitely an impact of smaller scale, individual or community-based actions that people are continuing to take, which are, definitely important as well as, the bigger actions that we need to continue to implement, whether it be, checking in on your communities and your neighbors, small actions like that, or, if you are, for example, ordering food from a restaurant or ordering takeout, being a little bit more patient and, ensuring that we're being kind to those workers that are ultimately doing the work, the difficult work that, we're kind of able to be being mindful of that. Whether it be coworkers helping each other out, for example, reminding each other to take breaks to drink water or having a bottle of water and, keeping an eye out on your coworkers as well and being like, hey, you're not looking well, keeping in mind the signs and symptoms of heat-related illnesses. Those are very important and small actions that we can take immediately in our workplaces or in our communities. There's, of course, the impact of lobbying and, the actions that we can take with government, which I think are very important to ensure that, again, these communities are being heard and are being put to the forefront, because we need some drastic action to be taken, as the impacts of climate and extreme weather related events are going to continue, unfortunately, for the next foreseeable future. So it's important that we take that action now rather than, hoping that things will somehow magically get better. There's also action that, for example, labor continues to take. UFCW, for example, in the past has done water drops or umbrella drops for outdoor workers. These are small things that we can do to ensure that we're supporting those that are doing the hard work, especially when they have no sort of protection from the elements, especially in areas where there's not much shade, where there's a huge impact of the lack of shade spaces in especially cities. So these are the kind of things that communities can look at and continue to look at into the future as well.
What a wonderful answer. So thorough of both the systemic and an individual and the labor approach as well. Thank you, Sartaj. We're actually right on time for our final question, which I'm excited to hear from everyone about. What are some short-term and long-term solutions we need to start thinking about now as it relates to workers' vulnerability to heat and access to cooling? Back to you, Senan.
Yeah. So I don't think these are new things that I'm going to talk about. But we all know care workers need to work to support themselves and their family back home. So whatever the temperature is, they have to work. Extreme heat or icy snow. So the solutions, I guess, not only for care workers, but for other workers during extreme heat, they need frequent rest breaks. So I don't know how we can put it in the legislation, maybe in Employment Standards Act, where during extreme heat, there should be frequent rest breaks for workers. Be proactive. Workers should be proactive. The community should be. And it could be a very long process and very long time to reverse what we have done to Mother Nature, but we can continue what we as communities and individuals have started. Reduce, reuse, and recycle, and teach our children the 3 R's and other ways to just be and this has been talked about very frequently. The climate change is really a problem. So we need to make sure that we don't add to that problem. And be prepared by organizing educational workshops to prepare workers and communities like care workers for extreme heat solutions. So I think education is key to our communities and to workers, and they should be trained to seek a place with comfortable temperature at home, by turning on electric fans or air conditioning units, or designated or going to designated cooling places like community centers. They should also be trained on how to use the cooling kits provided by the government, and there should be enough cooling kits for everyone. And if outdoors, like for care workers, they should take the kids and adults they're taking care of in the shade, always with sunscreen, hats, and sunglasses. And indoor or outdoors, always carry water bottles with clean drinking water for hydration. Create more indoor activities than outdoor activities for people that are taken care of. So these are just some of a few that should already be in the plan during this heat waves or all these problems of high heat. And yeah, education and being prepared and organized. That's the key to helping people out in the community. Thanks.
What a great list of answers. Thank you, and such tangible tips. On to you, Robin.
Sure. Yeah, totally agree with what Senan just said. I think like organizing folks, making sure people are prepared. A lot more education and outreach needs to happen to make sure people are connected to kind of services they need. Things like free Wi-Fi services and things like, for example, letting transit be free during any kind of extreme weather, because a lot of folks rely on like riding the SkyTrain around to stay cool and may not be able to afford the fare. I also think like the access to cooling piece is really important, whether that be a air conditioning unit that's portable or whether that be a heat pump or whatever in your home, like having the right to put that in your home and making sure that homes are built in and that that's embedded into the building code. But also the retrofit problem brings up a lot of challenges, but making sure people have access to a cool space in their home is really important. Washington and Oregon did this great program where they gave out AC units to people living in poverty, and BC government did give out a number of units, 10,000 units, but it was not anywhere near the demand of folks that would actually need that program. So I think expanding that program and taking away some of the barriers for folks to access a free AC unit if they need. And then things like outdoor washroom access for people that live outside, like making sure you have access to like cold water is really important. I think having public washrooms, like in some of our cities, we don't have public washrooms. And so, you know, having a place where you can just go and splash water in your face is really helpful. Misting centers, we talked a bit about access for fear, but I think making sure that these places of gathering are a lot more accessible. Like I think the free transit piece can help people get to cooling centers, but also like a lot of folks who speak a different language had no idea what the cooling centers even were that we spoke with. So I think, you know, making sure that materials and weather warnings are available in multilingual, Braille, for example, and that actual outreach is happening to people who would need those services the most. And then, you know, things like digital device programs, like a lot of folks who live outdoors or who are in extreme poverty or living in really poor housing may not have a phone or may not have Wi-Fi. And so like this like blast that the government sends being like, it's really hot, go take care of yourself. Like a lot of them just won't get that. So I think that working on digital equity in BC is really important as well, to make sure people have access to the internet and a device to look at the internet and the resources and information to get to where they need to go. And then I also support like libraries, public spaces staying open longer and extending their hours so that people can be in a place where they feel comfortable for longer and stay safe and cool. And then I think the other piece that's just I have to say is that like criminalizing people who are relying on public space living outdoors or criminalizing people that are in poverty does not lead to them being able to protect themselves in these situations. Like oftentimes people in poverty, especially deep poverty, need access to resources. And so giving people better resources such as income, such as better working conditions, such as a living wage, and better worker protections and tenant protections can all build a much more cohesive and strong safety net for folks experiencing poverty. Thank you.
Thank you, Rowan. What a yeah, another very thorough response. And so many important points. I appreciate it. On to you, Byron.
Thank you. I think that important also is to continue pressuring the federal government for status for all, We know that migrant worker without or with precarious immigration status is basically in a very risky situation because they are afraid of making use of the little rights that we have here. And it is important to continue pressuring for the status for all. And also, I think that in terms of organizing, we need to see how we interact. Today was an interesting panel, and I think we need to work together and making sure that we interact also in the solutions and in the actions that we take. Last week, for example, there was a farm worker that was fired in one of the farms. The collective response in the community was amazing. Many phone calls to that farm, letting the farm owner know that we have an eye on them. I think we need to do similar situations when there is a workplace that is not following the orders from WorkSafe, for example. And we know that migrant workers are at risk, or anyone else is at risk. We need to respond with a collective voice and maybe making phone calls, hundreds of phone calls to that workplace, letting them know that we have an eye on them. Thank you.
Absolutely. You say collective action gets the good, so absolutely self-organizing and advocating. Absolutely, Byron. Thank you. And finally, Sartaj.
Yeah, a lot of good points have already been brought up. I think that if we're looking at a short-term lens, then definitely things such as ensuring that workplaces are providing adequate training, not only to how to deal with any sort of heat-related events or illnesses, but also prevention. I think that a lot of the times there's a lot of talk about what to do if something happens, but I think there needs to be a lot of conversation on how to prevent it and be proactive about it. So how to, prevent any, sorry, that's my dog, heat-related instances, and what we can do to look out for one another, especially if you notice your coworkers, acting different or a certain kind of way, and what we can do to ensure that that happens, and perhaps looking at legislation to ensure that all workplaces have to do that. I think that's an important part of the puzzle, which is community action. I think that there needs to be more talk about flexibility of dress code as well, especially in workplaces where there's perhaps like a strict dress code, whether it be like restaurants or anything like that, ensuring there is some flexibility there to ensure that people are able to stay as cool as possible. As mentioned before, ensuring that there's more flexibility in terms of breaks and, people being able to take water breaks and having adequate access to water at work as well. I think that's a huge part of the puzzle, and something that if you're at work and you see that this is happening at your workplace, trying to take that action yourself, or perhaps reaching out to labor organizations such as WSN or UFCW or whatever it may be to get that support to put those actions into place at work. In terms of long term, there's definitely, like Senan mentioned, there needs to be a lot of improvement to the Employment Standards Act. I think we're far behind in terms of where we're at right now, and there's so much that the world continues to move forward, and we need to adapt, and we need to really look into the future and see that not only should we be looking at what happens if workers are struck in these positions, but how can we prevent it first and foremost, and that goes for WorkSafe as well, ensuring that those that are having workplaces where there isn't adequate access to cooling, that they're able to make those complaints. And not only that, if they do fall victim to some sort of heat-related illness, that they have proper measures that can be taken. So I think there's so many different things that we can do, and ultimately it comes down to getting support and resources and sharing them as well with our communities, including at an individual level. Like, for example, the government of BC and BC Hydro announced that they're doing like portable ACs giveaway kind of things for those that qualify with a certain amount of income. And of course that doesn't go far enough, and there's going to be many restrictions to ensure that it's almost impossible to be able to take part in that. But of course, any sort of those kind of things help in terms of short-term solutions as well, ensuring that we're looking out for one another and, trying to tackle things not only from a individualistic or community-driven response, but on a larger scale as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sartaj. Another wonderful, thorough answer. I feel like I've learned a lot from all of you in the last little bit. We have just enough time. I see, Sanan, you dropped this wonderful letter writing campaign about what we can do next. So if you want to chat about that for a second and let everybody know what that's all about, so they can definitely sign that.
So Byron actually mentioned it in one of his responses about regularization. So I think it's very crucial that that migrants, especially the undocumented migrants, should be regularized, and that we do have this campaign with Migrant Rights Network and the Vancouver Committee for Domestic Workers and Caregivers' Rights and the Sanctuary Health Vancouver collective are very active in Migrant Rights Network. So please, please write letters or do our petitions, and please tell your friends and your other organization members to really take this action, because we really need it at this point in time, while the government is actually reviewing their regularization options, and also the care workers being the policy is going to expire in June 2024, and we really need the government to look into a much improved program, and that is, of course, status for all and full immigration status for all. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for the link. I hope everybody takes 5 minutes out of their day to open that link that Sanan sent in the chat to sign this very important call to action. Wanted to pass it to any other panelists if you had any other calls to action. I know that. Yes, please, Rowan, please.
I wanted to quickly plug the Transit for Teens action today. The Transit for Teens youth folks are doing a Earth Day rally later today. So I'll drop the link for that in the chat and a link to an op-ed they put out today. And I also just wanted to plug, come follow the BC Poverty Reduction Coalition online, because we're going to be running some elections campaigns pertinent to these issues. So if you're interested in that, I will also, that will be upcoming soon.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rowan. Yes, absolutely. I hope folks do that as well. I know that WSN has a letter we have a demand letter out to the government for maximum or too hot to work protections, including a maximum temperature policy and enforcement of health and safety regulations. So I'll also plug that in and drop it in the chat. With 2 minutes to spare, I wonder maybe we can take one question. Or 2 questions if you're very speedy. You can put your hand up with the hand up feature on Zoom, and we'll get to you. And I'm just plugging in our letter now. So it would be amazing if folks could sign that as well.
While we're waiting for a question, other than the letter as well, I think we kind of talked a bit about the climate and labor report that WSN did, but I would really recommend that people actually go and take the time to read it if they're able to. I think there's a lot of great information there, and there was a lot of great work that was put into it. So just want to amplify that.
Thank you, Sartaj. Yes, if I do say so myself, I think the report is quite informative, and I appreciate that plug-in as well. I guess I'm not seeing any hands up. So thank you all for coming. With 1 minute to spare on your lunch breaks, I hope you had some yummy food or you're off to eat some lunch now. Thank you to all the panelists for their incredibly informative responses and for being here. Happy Earth Day, everybody, and thanks for coming. I appreciate it. Take care, everybody.
Thank you so much. Take
Thank you so
care.
much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Hello. Oh, so
Bye.
slow.
Oh, that's okay. Nikki, great job moderating.
Thank you. Oh my God.
Thank you. That was so great. Thank you so much, everyone.
Really, really wonderful, wonderful panel. I really appreciate it. Thank
Thanks
you.
for organizing these great people to get together, you folks.
Oh, wow. You all were so amazing.
I
So
learned a lot.
Yeah, I think that was great and a great turnout too. So that was
Yeah.
amazing.
I couldn't see how many people were in the waiting or in the meeting, so it looked like a lot. It was great. So that's awesome. Thank you all. So smart.
Thank you so much. Take good care.
You too. Thanks again.
Bye.
Take care of yourself, Pam, too.
Thank you.
Yes, feel better soon.
Thanks. Appreciate it.